Okay, so welcome. It's so good to see you. I'm really happy we could put it together. And in the audience, welcome to the program. Guest is Jason Figueira. He's a filmmaker, and he's getting his he's cutting his teeth, as it were, it's fair to say, in terms of filmmaking. He understands it well. He's a relatively young man, 23, 24, I guess 24. Now, 24 years old. And I know that he's been involved in getting a master's degree by making a film for that project for that degree and so forth about public access. That we're very pleased that you're doing that. And Jason, welcome. I mean, you're welcome so very much to conversation.
Thank you very much.
Really pleased we could put it together. Share with us, if you could, please, your background. Born and raised, a little of the education, and how you got into film, and then we want to talk some about the modern dimensions of filmmaking, and then we want some time to talk about the phenomena of public access as part of that overall, movement. But could you share your background, please?
Sure. Well, I was born here in the United States, in New York, in Jackson Heights.
Okay.
And my parents had come from Guyana.
Oh, really?
In 1978.
In South America?
Yeah, British Guyana. They were from Georgetown.
Right.
And they had immigrated here in 1978. And so, but I was born not until 1986. So I had spent a good while, working, saving up money so they can have a family here. So I'm an only child.
That's an interesting country.
It is. It was filled with a lot of political divisions.
Surely.
A lot of it was almost like a pawn on a chessboard for a lot of the wealthier countries.
Yeah.
It was called by Chetty Jagan, its president, the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow, right next to Haiti?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And the thing is, it was divided into three parts. It was ruled by three different countries at the same time. It was Britain, the Dutch, and the French.
Well, we had French, Dutch, and Guyana. But which is, I'm a little confused. It's up near, just east of Venezuela and so forth, across from Trinidad and Tobago and that, I think, is the placement in terms of on the continent.
It's pretty much next to Brazil.
Next to Brazil. Yeah. Brazil also.
It's closer to the coast.
Yeah.
It's next to Brazil and Venezuela. And
it had an interesting background. It really did. That's interesting. I just had a friend who was down there. His name happened to be Akbar Mohammed. He's a spokesman for Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam, and he got arrested and things like that. But anyway, and there was an interesting Jim Jones was there. They had that was a big thing that happened back way when and everything. But it is interesting. And Jada, is that his pronunciation? He was a major political leader.
Jagan.
Chetty
Jagan.
Yeah, Chetty Jagan. That's an interesting name. Anyway, so it's interesting. We also, Reed Stowe's wife is from there. Reed Stowe's a fellow who sailed into the oceans of the world, and she went with him on an epic voyage of setting a world record on a schooner sailing on the oceans of the world, and she's from there. So a whole lot of shaking going on. But anyway, that was your background, right? And your parents, were they academic or were they? Well, the family setting.
They're from a family setting. My mother came from Waterloo Street. That was the name of the street. And my father, was raised not too far. So, but they had met in Guyana, and got married up here when they came here. So, but as I said, I wasn't born until 1986.
Yeah, I see. So. Right. And you went to school and so forth. And you're at Hofstra, right? Is where you're involved now. But undergraduate and everything, where did you go to school?
When I was growing up, I went mostly to private schools.
Oh, you did?
I wouldn't say that, and I think there's always a stereotype that private schools are for the wealthy. That's not always true. I mean, it's for
But you have the bearing of a lord or a rich person. You have that bearing, don't you think?
No, I don't know.
You don't? Okay. I'm sort of playing with you, brother. I'm just playing with you.
I try not to maintain the
You seem like
baron,
an Eton man to me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think.
You're the first person to tell me that. Wow.
You know what I mean? It's kind of funny. Isn't it funny, some of the things out of the past?
Yeah,
I understand.
I just thought of myself as a regular middle-class guy. But,
right. America's famous for this wide middle class. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And
it's great for that. Yeah.
I used to go to a lot of Lutheran schools. And, it's funny, I'm Catholic and I'm going to Lutheran schools. So I get two different religious teachings every single time. And but when I went to college, I decided to get out there more. And I decided to go to a public college. So I went to Queens College. It's a CUNY school in Flushing. And I have to say, I really enjoyed my time there. It really taught me a lot.
Okay.
I really got to branch out from just, you know, the Lutheran school.
Yeah.
Now I went to a school where there are so many different religions, so many different people coming from all over the world.
And did you do liberal arts or what?
Yes, I was in media studies. I majored in media studies.
You wanted to go into media studies, so you knew you wanted to do that, I guess, at a relatively younger age.
At first, I wanted to do computer science because a lot of my family members were involved, and they were very successful at it. But I realized that was not where my passion lied. I was forcing myself to like it. And
yeah, I understand. That's an interesting thing to be able to connote in your own consciousness when you're...
In my first semester, I realized it would be a lot of math, which I didn't like. I'm not a fan of math.
Okay.
And a lot of computer science. I didn't mind the computer science aspect, but I had to sit myself down and say, is this what I want to do?
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that it's not what I love to do. I was only doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, that's called being outer directed. You're directed by the force outside of yourself rather than what you yourself, like a hound dog after a fox, really wants to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's important, I think, to be in that mode of leading your life. It seems to me, and there's a term autodidact, where you teach yourself, or you're on, you know what I'm saying, rather than getting outer stimulus for meeting endless prerequisites about what you have to know in order to follow the academic course.
Exactly. And you know, in my first semester, I would say I started looking through the major's handbook that they gave us. And I said, well, what is it that I want to do? So I thought back to when I was in elementary school. What is it I always wanted to pursue? And I love to watch television. And I used to love to watch animation.
Right.
I was always an animation fanatic.
I understand, yeah. Right.
You know, Johnny Quest was one of my favorite animations. And it was very interesting because, you know, I said, well, I would like to do that, but I can't draw for my life. You know, but
you can't what?
I can't draw for my life.
Oh, you can't draw.
I'm not very artistic in that sense. You know, so I said, I know how I want something to look.
Right.
But to make my hands, to get it to transcribe on paper, it's a totally different story.
Could you have a design that you could have in your head and just sort of have other people do what your design dictates? It would be like a director of an animation project.
That's what led me into media studies.
Really?
Because media studies, it wasn't just where, you know, English, you're just writing. You're learning how to use the camera, learning how to express yourself, not just through animation now, but through studio, through film, and you're actually learning to analyze different kinds of film, and I realized that's where my forte was.
Analyze different kinds of film.
So, for example, noir. You'd analyze.
You like noir?
Noir is pretty interesting. You know, I love science fiction.
Science fiction.
And I realized, and sadly, you know, there weren't enough science fiction classes for us there. You know, I really would have loved to looked into that.
It's interesting. A lot of the science fiction, the science is a big field, of course, and everything, but a lot of the science fiction is very dark. I mean, a lot of the projections into the future have a very dark thing. They've always got some Terminator, somebody's going to come down and, you know what I'm saying?
And get you,
Yeah, so it gives a dark picture of the future. A large part of science fiction is in that vein, like the things that Schwarzenegger would do. You know, you got a creature in the future, and he's a terrible thing. There's a lot of what's that one in Australia? There was one in Australia with that famous guy, I forget, Mad Max or something, you know.
Oh yeah.
But or I Am Legend with Will Smith.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
That's a future thing, and the future is that the world's been blown up and is terrible.
Very dark scenario.
You understand? There's a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
Can you think of something that is future? It's just interesting intellectually. What future films are there that are optimistic?
Well,
I mean, let's try and think just off the top of our head.
I can name a TV show that's actually very optimistic.
Optimistic, okay, in a realistic, okay, yeah, go
almost
ahead.
in a realistic. If you remember back in the 70s, there was a show called The $6 Million Man.
I do remember. That's not Bionic Man.
It's Bionic Man.
Oh, it is.
It's Bionics, and Bionics is actually pretty much like almost a real field today. Yeah, nowadays, you're getting almost, I wouldn't say cyborg, but prosthetics now is not just plastic and wood.
No, not at all. They had a thing on
technology.
television. I saw it a couple nights ago. It's BBC or something, and there was a guy running. He had amputated below the knee on both of them. He had some sort of a thing that was running, and he was running, and they were like little things. They were like artificial things that were running, and they were like things. And he thinks he was running. I think he said he was getting an advantage because there was a titanium thing that gave him a jump, and he could run faster. If I'm not mistaken, faster than somebody who had all of his limbs in order.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or the cochlear implant, people that were deaf are able to hear now. And there's a lot of things. Okay, yeah, okay.
So those kinds of, I mean, that's really an example of a positive message.
Was that the theme of the $1 Million Man? Was a positive scene of the future?
Yeah, I think that it was
Really?
because the show overall, it started off a little dark. It showed you how hard it was for him to get adjusted to it, which is what drew me to the show. But in the end, I mean, you have to admit, if a government agency, without his permission, operated on you and gave you robotic parts, that would be very. I think his psyche would be a little bit more traumatized.
I don't know the details of that. I don't think I followed it, that particular one. But more what I was getting at is the future of science fiction. You had. People writing about that, Arthur C. Clarke and that, or whatever, people writing on it, or the famous one who wrote the other, But is there anyone who writes in a future mode that is equal? Usually it's the things that are talking about the future are things where there's the Matrix, or things where the system is just totally oppressive.
Well, you have things like George Orwell, 1984.
No,
Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
Well, those are from the literature, those kind of things. But others also are like that. There's nothing that's been done that is really any. Suppose you got a negative scenario that it's going to be terrible oppression, and there's going to be bad guys running everything, and there's evil forces, or some alien. They're always evil. That come down to kill everyone.
Unless they're Superman.
Well, Superman was different. Superman was for the good of.
Right,
for
he was
the
an
good,
alien.
but within an alienating world and everything. But there's nothing looking forward of the future that is like liberating, and yet the promise of the technology, which is there now, it's being expressed in film and so forth, it does have a side. It isn't all dark. It is. There is a side that could be seen as equally existentially, significantly new and liberating, rather than projecting the premises of the system that's being overcome and a successful view of humanity, let's say 100 years out or something. You don't see anything like that.
Right.
Or do we? Or is there anyone? I just came to my head now.
I mean, nowadays, I would turn on the Sci-Fi Channel. I'd look at some of the movies, and it's all violence. I mean, it's just basic violence. I mean, there isn't really even much of a story. Like whoever wrote it just wrote it for effect.
It's as though nobody can project or think of a positive future. Practically nobody.
I think they can.
Or who does? I mean, outside of fluffy things, but serious writers and intellectuals.
Right. To be honest,
do you understand what I just came up with the idea now as we sit here and talk. So I'd never thought about it, but it's an interesting question.
To be honest, I think that people can have a positive outlook. It's just that they choose not to because it depends on the person who's behind it, who's the director, or the writer.
But they're also reflecting the spirit of the age, or the spirit of the moment. The spirit of the moment seems not to make it possible for a creative view of let's just say in a loose term, a liberated humanity rather than an enslaved one.
Exactly.
Do you understand? And yet that possibility is there, intrinsic in the state of technology and everything, but it just doesn't seem to be any ability to do it. There's the thing in news: if it bleeds, it leads. So if you've got violence and clash, then it gets attention of eyeballs and so forth.
I think
so. Violence is,
I think sci-fi has become a victim of that with most mainstream television today. When I would turn on, let's say, Channel 11 or something, mostly vampire, werewolves, whatever. I mean, that's becoming the new norm. And they're very dark stories. But I think this is one of the things that also led me to public access television.
Thank you. Maybe we can get to something positive
I
in
think
this
actually,
dark picture. Right?
There's
Maybe,
a connection here because, when you turn on a lot of television today, it's very commercial.
Or film.
Even film. Even film, yeah. Film especially.
Oh, you get My Fair Lady, or no, Hollywood films all have a happy ending, don't they?
Not
Hollywood
now.
films don't. They did at one time. We would say, the boy gets the girl. And
they still do this. Some of them still do.
Yeah.
But some can take a dark turn now.
Right.
Especially the horror films.
Yeah, they do. They tend to. Yeah.
But it was for commercial purposes. This is what packed the theaters.
Yeah.
And this is what draws people out to pay $9 a ticket for some. I've seen this on some theaters, $9 a ticket. How can you pay to watch this commercialism? But what struck me about public access, and this is what really got me interested in it,
was
that it was free. It's free. And this isn't just...
I know, it's so unique.
Yes, this isn't just a celebrity. This isn't like Matt Damon on the Today Show.
Yeah, right.
This is this guy you would see every day on the street, and now he's here on television purporting his thoughts, ideas, or even trying to reach out to a community. He's fighting for people who have AIDS, and as I was interviewing some members of ACT UP in the earlier days with AIDS, the mainstream media looked down on them, even ignored the AIDS community on giving them life-saving advice. They portray them as these sickly, dying people, or put them in shadow, because there was this belief that, if you had AIDS, it's kind of like shameful. It's a shame. It's maybe because of your lifestyle. So you kind of deserved it, I guess, And the problem was that ACT UP said, no, that's not right. But how can we get the message across? We don't own the media. The people don't own the mainstream media.
It was terrible then too, as that AIDS was coming like a plague. It was awful, the high rate of deaths, and it was just a death, and nobody was doing anything. And they've got some things that can deal with it now to ameliorate it. But that was motivated by an existential, scream, as it were, by people who are being submitted to it, and the propaganda.
So. There was a certain part, I would say Diva TV, was, and someone from ACT UP can give you the specific, history, but one of the purposes of Diva TV was to get that message out there through media, not really through the mainstream media, but one of the means they used was public access television. Because it was so accessible to people, they can use this community medium to get this message across.
From your expression and from your enthusiasm, I would think that you're someone who generally likes the idea of a true, honest-to-God, liberating democracy for all. That would be something that would make your heart sing, if people could be democratically liberated. Everybody.
I think one of the most ridiculous things I had to believe in college, when I had studied political science, I did it as a minor, was the oppression of freedom of speech.
Or oppression in general.
Oppression in general,
oppressive.
but especially freedom of speech.
Does it seem that way to you? The whole system seems oppressive to me.
The system is designed for the benefit of a few. I mean, it's not designed for the benefit of all the people. I think that's the way it's worked throughout history too.
Thank you. You've studied some history,
I mean,
and it's always been like that in history.
And by the way, that's always facilitated the collapse of many of the empires, was because the leaders became so corrupt. I mean, Rome, the leaders became so manichistic. It was beyond expression. I mean, they went from nobility and descended into madness. A lot of Nero was. A lot of people. Caligula. Didn't he give a funeral for a house fly?
It was just bad. I know Lord Acton said power tends to corrupt. You ought to add the tends, but absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And it just seems to be operative and everything like that in terms of the current situation. And then we also live in a situation where things are changing so much. James Joyce had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. I wonder if we're ever going to awaken from a situation where everything is geared toward the benefit of the rich and powerful already, and nothing is geared toward the masses of the people, like you were celebrating Everyday Joe in public access and everything. It's, you know what I'm saying? Do you? Yeah.
I think the term awakening, I think people already know. that there is an oppressive system. I think
you
they
think
already.
So?
I think they're
well,
already
if they
aware.
didn't, with the debt ceiling and all the things that are going on in the world at this moment, on what's the date today? July 1, 2011.
Exactly.
If they didn't know that the planet was in deep trouble, they haven't been looking at the news at all.
The point is that they do know, but I don't think they feel like they can do anything about it.
Okay.
I think that's the accepted mentality we're given. Like, that's the way the world works. And this is, I guess, growing up, speaking, as someone who's just learning, the world around him.
Yeah.
People have that attitude. You can do nothing to change this. And I hate that mentality because I say, well, that's like backing yourself into a corner.
Right.
And letting these people get away with doing something wrong. Oh, you can't do anything about it. They're always going to win. Well,
right.
That's for me,
well,
I hate giving up like that.
Yeah. You can't fight City Hall.
And
there's that's a term, that's one of the things that you're to learn. And what you're to learn, you haven't had to do military service in the service. I got drafted when I was young. They had a draft. You had to go. You didn't want to go. You had to go to fight something and everything. And I was just an enlisted man. I had no like for it. I just would drug off, But I used to try and explain to the sergeants, we could do things democratically, or try to tell it to a prison guard or something, or a police officer even, We could do things in a reasonable, democratic, intelligent, and they said, just shut up, Gump, or private, and do what you're told. And that's what you're being taught by the agencies that do the socializing.
Exactly.
Purpose of the agencies and institutions is to teach you to be responsive to an authority figure. No? Seems that way.
It seems that
way. They do it in the name of
Yes.
curriculum and grading and testing and all this kind of thing. Yeah.
And the thing is that when I was going to school, they wouldn't do that to us. They wouldn't say like you have to submit. But when you learn in life, I guess, like when you find work and whatnot, you have to be submitted because. I think this is what my parents would tell me too. They don't need you. You need them.
Right.
And that's the mentality that prevails. It's like, they don't need you to survive.
It's the attitude of a serf
it
on a
comes
feudal
about.
estate.
I wouldn't say serf. I mean, I wouldn't want to put the people down like that. I think that they're trying to impose that idea. But the people themselves are awake. They don't like that idea. They hate that idea. But the point is the way society is organized.
Right.
It's like, oh, you don't have enough money to afford your house. You need that job to maintain your lifestyle, especially now with foreclosures.
And that's called
going
responsibility. That the answering to the responsibility of the economy, is responsible. And being creative or anything like that is not going to get you anywhere, or idealistic, or caring about the least or anything. Just look out for number one, and that sort of thing. And that's encouraged overwhelmingly in the society. And when you said you liked public access in terms of multimedia, you were learning the technologies of multimedia, working with the new technology, editing and everything, which is interesting and a great field to be interested in, and you're working in that now. But you were particularly interested in public access because it was free. That's very interesting, isn't it?
It's
How many
free.
things are, let's say, outside of the public, let's say public school? They have a public school system. You're paying taxes to the public school, the government, in order to have a place where a kid can go to school, and it's public and it's free. And there's some other things, I guess, there, but it comes out of a dialectic of the public sector and private sector. You tax the private sector entities, or the people in there who get that, and then that goes in for something governmental that becomes public or free to people. But in public access, you've got a system here in public access where the payment of this studio and the ability to have this equipment available to the people to make programs here, the citizens, is done in a way where it can be done. The costs that are involved are all met by payments from the cable industry that have agreed over the decades-long existence of cable television to provide a place where people can produce programming and not have to have it be a business.
Exactly.
It used to be to do a program like this, if you were doing it in the private sector, at a studio, on private market, or in the private sector market, it'd be minimally about $400 or $500 to make a program like you and I are doing now. That makes it different than that we can just sit down and talk.
Exactly.
And there's no cost involved.
Precisely.
Now, to a lot of people, that doesn't figure into the gross national product. We're having a good conversation and so forth,
doesn't make
and
any
it's being
good business
provided,
sense.
and so you're doing programming, and then the distribution of it is there, but it's not adding to. What you should be doing is figuring out how you can make some money.
At it.
That's the only value that trumps everything else. Because if you don't, you're going to starve. And they got that kind of pressure that they put on people, and to have any institution that relates to the private sector where the citizens can do something and not have to be thinking about money.
Exactly.
You understand? Now that's thought of as being, to even think that you could do anything just for the joy of relating to another human being or anything that isn't calculating money or power relationships or something is thought of almost as subversive by the society at large. Do you sense what I'm saying?
It's not even just subversive. I think they view it as...
No, it's considered subversive if you're not in that mode.
Exactly.
Of dog eat dog, really.
And for some people, they don't just use the word subversive. They'll use words like, oh, it's immature.
Yeah, yes, you'll get that. You're still young,
I get that a lot. It's
I get that, and I'm
very
old.
Childish.
Yeah, or idealistic in a negative. Idealism is thought of as just absolute stupid. You got to be tough, and you got to be adversarial, and you got to be. You know what I'm saying?
I love the one when they say you got to be a go-getter. You got to just go in there. Don't stop to think. Just do it. And I love it when people tell me that because they don't know that they've walked into a trap when they do that. Because for me, I say, well, think of it this way. The person they want me to be, I would say, tiger man, tiger man, you got to rush in there and take care of it.
It's good to make fun of it, isn't it? Yeah.
The thing is, but here's the thing.
Alpha
stop
male.
To think. The alpha male. The problem with the alpha male, thinking
Tough
is a
guy.
crime. Now, here's the thing. I compare it to someone who's running, right?
Yeah, right.
He's running a race.
Yeah.
He's running so fast. He's looking at the other people. He's bypassing them. He turns around. He sees a wall. Now, this man, he could see the wall coming, but he's going to try to ram through it. He's going to use his muscle, or he's going to try to climb over it. He can't do it, so he's stuck. So the thinking man, the guy behind him, is just like the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. He's behind him. He says, this man is an idiot. He says, why are you trying to run through it or climb it when I can just go around it?
Yeah.
See you later, and you beat him. And that's the kind of man they're trying to prompt you to be. That's my
They want
perception.
you to run into the wall.
They want you to run into the wall because then when you smack dab into the wall, guess what? You're helpless.
And then
you can't see a way out.
Then you can't make any deal for yourself against their power that they have against you. And you'll
So
submit
now
like
you
a
need
serf.
them. You see, they're the ones holding the rope saying, I can get you over.
Right.
But here are the smart people actually going, okay, no, you can just go around it. You don't need their rope.
I think the youth, do you think that you're young? Do you think the youth are becoming smart? I mean, if only by extension of in questioning the basic assumptions of our institutions and so forth in a way that's valid in terms of a dawning new possibility of a more liberated way for humanity, that they can see that the old people are stumbling over outdated institutions that are being reified by them rather than getting on with the idea of seeing the bright future ahead. There was a good spirit at the time of Woodstock. You're probably sick of hearing that. But there was progress being made. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? What do you think?
I think basically we are being encouraged to become more idealistic,
more idealistic. Is it abroad in the world among the youth?
I don't know. I mean,
care
to say
for the least
abroad
among
in the
us?
world.
Do they? No, I'm thinking. Well, this country, let's say, but the world also.
Right.
I mean, is there any hope in that the youth? Youth tend to be idealistic.
Yeah.
And you're thought of as if you're young and idealistic, it's to be encouraged. If you're old and idealistic, you're just stupid because you haven't learned the hard lessons that idealism, there's no chance. Don't be concerned with anybody else but yourself and the values that are being. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I think that one thing I would like to say about that is,
okay,
you know, from what I've seen, one thing about older people, I would say, is that they may not be as idealistic, or in some cases, they may not have had the same education as their children.
Yeah.
But they know the world. They know what it is. And I think the problem is that the youth,
the old people do, or the young?
The older people.
The older people know what it is. The younger people know what it ought to be.
Ought to be.
That's what I'm trying to say.
That's the big difference.
It is a big difference, yeah.
The problem is, though, I think a lot of the younger people nowadays are trying to be directed to what it ought to be, but we're not really shown enough of what it really is, and that you have to learn on your own.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're showing a lot of projections. That we started talking about science fiction. We're showing a lot of projections of the horrors of the future if it continues, and we know that. We know that kind of thing, but we're not shown very much. The other side we were talking about, we're not shown of what it could. We're not. There's no vision. There's no vision emanating from the elders about the way things can be made different in a way that's going to serve everybody rather than just the few. It's all going toward the frosting on the cake.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the media can address. I think public access can address it. You got interested in public access. You could have been interested in motion pictures, Hollywood motion pictures, or getting a HBO special on something or something. But you got interested for your project in public access. Because it was free, you said. That's what came out of your mouth.
Well,
maybe you could talk about how you came upon that.
Sure.
Maybe we could talk about George Stoney. Right?
Oh, yeah.
He's a great pioneer. Wonderful
definitely.
Man. A real visionary, yeah.
Well, when I first started with the idea, I used to intern at Queens Public Television, which was a wonderful experience. I highly recommend interning at any public access facility you can. There
are about 3,000 across the country.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing the audience, and the whole audience should be aware of and support the institution. There's problems, of course, but yeah, okay, go ahead, yeah.
So basically,
you were out in Queens, yeah.
Queens Public Television.
Right. Queens Public Access.
Yes, Queens Public Access Television. And the thing is that they taught me how to use the camera, how to edit. They got, I was able to get my feet wet.
Okay.
And I was able to work with the community and see the inner workings of public access.
You did it there. You learned a lot there.
Right. And the thing is when I had first come out, though, the sad part was, like, I didn't fully appreciate it at the time because I did want to get into motion pictures. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to do screenwriting and get into mainstream, like most other kids.
Right. Well, that's an admirable thing. Screenwriting is really important.
It is.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing is, but as I learned when I was leaving college, it's not the easiest to get a job in this industry. I've had a friend who did the same thing, and he went to a job fair one time, and there was just no jobs, it was just internships.
Yeah.
So we realized we would have to make our own way.
Make your own way by making your own
films.
Yes, right. Good idea, exactly. I would say, wouldn't you?
So, and the thing is, we said, well, I remember saying to myself, how can I get, do my own show? How can I get it aired and broadcast? And I thought,
but you were at Queens, you could do it there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's when it came back to me.
And you didn't have to have all kinds of money to pay to do it.
Oh no.
You couldn't do it in the private sector.
I took I took training. I actually became a producer. I took training there. I learned field, and I learned editing. So I got certified in both of those.
Did you edit? Was it linear editing or non-linear? It would have been non-linear by the time you got to it. It used to be linear editing my old days. Yeah, I remember. Okay,
we learned non-linear. We learned Adobe.
Adobe. Okay.
Which is a great editing system too.
Okay.
And the thing is when I got interested in public access, I began to realize that there was so much that this medium can offer. And it wasn't just about the medium. It became more about the producers, the people on it.
Yeah.
This isn't what you were seeing on mainstream television.
Right.
And I'd say around this time, I have to really be honest. Around this time.
This is about 4 years ago, or 3 or 4
years ago.
3 or 4. Yeah. Okay. Right.
I was. Well, even in my undergraduate years, I was becoming very spiritual. Like I was reading.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I was reading the Bible on my own.
Really?
I was doing Bible study with
You're Christian, right?
Catholic.
Catholic.
We consider ourselves Christian.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So basically, I was reading it on my own.
Okay.
And most of my writing was becoming influenced by it. So, as I said, I was very interested in working.
Yeah.
Putting out shows that had religious thought. like my blog, you know.
Did you put out a regular series on Queens Public Access?
No, that was actually one of the things I regretted not doing during my internship because they highly encouraged us to do it.
Yeah.
At the time, however, I was too young to understand the importance of that.
Okay.
I would have loved to. I mean, now when I'm done with this film, that's what I plan on doing, going back and getting certified in the studio, getting my own show.
In public access?
Yes.
You want to work in public access?
You know, I'd love to have my own show, public access.
Okay, right.
It's a wonderful experience.
It sure is.
From doing this film, I got a taste of public access. You know, I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
This is a journey.
There are some are different than others. There's a lot of variety,
Oh,
but
yes.
overall the institution is very good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very partial to here, Manhattan. This is a great place here. This is a great ship, Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
For some reason, I loved Queens too because
Queens,
they say, is the most diverse borough in New York. I'm not trying to.
It is true. I think it's true.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's so diverse. You have all these different languages. And
does that include like out at what do you call Queen Astor? No. What's the town just where there's a lot of Greeks?
Astoria.
Yeah, and that's
Astoria's
part of Queens, right? And then you get out to right.
There's even a Greek show on Queens Public Television.
Yeah, I know.
You know, and you have news in Thai. You know, for people from Thailand.
You know, they've got 195 now. They're going to get more nations all the time at the United Nations. And there was a thing on television where I've said it before, but there's like 100. There's sizable communities out. It was 192. There's sizable communities of the 192 nation states that exist in the UN, something like 189 of those 192, they're sizable communities within metropolitan New York. Everybody in the world is here.
Oh,
yes. I love it. I think it's wonderful.
It is. And the great thing about Queens is you know, I live in Jackson Heights. And Jackson Heights is actually now becoming more for, there's now a strong gay community in Jackson Heights.
There is or isn't? Is, okay.
And now there's, before that, there was, and it still is now, strong Hispanic community.
Oh,
so you have like from people from Ecuador, Colombia, Mexico. You got it all in there. And the thing is, you have in Astoria, just like right over, you have the Greek, you know, the Greek neighborhoods, European, some of the more Polish, I would say, are there.
They're all here.
And you go into Flushing. It's now becoming Little Chinatown. It has Chinese. You have people from Thailand. You have people from Taiwan. You have people from Malaysia.
Yeah, right.
It's incredible.
I know, it's really
how Queens is changing. I've heard stories of people who were once in Queens back in the 60s or 70s when it was mostly Italians and Irish.
Yeah.
And they come back to Queens and one person was like, "Oh my God, what happened? It changed. I don't even recognize it anymore."
Well, I like the diversity myself. I don't like it white bread. I was raised white bread, but you know, like it's all white Anglo-Saxon Protestants and everything. But anyway, I like the variety. Why don't we talk a little bit about the actual production? You're working now on a major on a documentary about public access. And you said you edited in Adobe, and now I guess the editing is all being done, or by a great deal of it. We had a couple systems. We had Final Cut Pro, which is
actually I'm editing in Final Cut Pro.
You are editing in Final Cut Pro.
This film.
7, right?
Yep.
Okay, and that makes the difference, and people will be familiar with that because all the world's starting to be able to edit. We used to have a thing called Avid, which was an editing system that was very Cadillac, I think, for the networks and that sort of thing. And now Final Cut Pro is changing and everything. Is it getting easier to do editing?
Oh, yes.
It is getting easier.
I mean, editing now, even on simple programs like Windows Movie Maker or iMovie, you can do simple editing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I would just like to say that getting footage off the internet now is amazing because, for example, let's say I want a video from YouTube. I just learned a process last week. In lickety-split, less than an hour, you can have that video from YouTube onto Final Cut Pro. Edit it any way you want.
I had my friend just download a thing to me where I can do that, too.
Yeah,
I can't quite figure it out yet, but it's getting
amazing.
Easier to get footage.
There are even websites that will take that link.
Right.
All you need is that link from YouTube.
Right.
And it'll turn it into a software, or it'll turn it into a movie file for you. put it into your computer.
And you can stick it in the movie. Yeah.
And you could stick it in there. You need to convert it? They have programs that convert it. MPEG Stream Clip. I'd like to put that.
It's really funny you're
amazing.
bringing that up because this is exactly what he's been telling me these last few days. A friend of mine who's from afar, from down south, and he's telling me now you got to get it converted. It's the same thing he's been teaching me last week, trying to teach me.
MPEG Stream Clip. When I started using it, it was amazing. It can convert almost anything. And the wonderful thing about MPEG Stream Clip is that it can take videos now from YouTube.
Yeah.
And literally, you just need the link, download it, and it converts it for you right there.
And then you can just add that to your bar or your timeline.
Edit it, whatever you want.
Edit it in, everything.
And you might even want to edit. Maybe you just want to put it out on your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah. So it's getting easier to or more things are happening. The increase is partly to do with the exponential increasing of computing capability, which is going almost L-shaped now. It's going to be getting like that. Now you've got on the high end of the cell phones, it used to be everywhere, you've got these advanced cell phones, Android and iPod or iPhone and everything. And those are really advanced where you can handle a lot of applications, and people have we're going to end up with I guess the UN says we're going to have 10 billion people by 2020 or something like that. And everybody's going to have a television channel. They're going to be able to produce from their iPhone almost, because it's becoming, there's a big revolution going on in communications, is there not?
And you know what? That's one of the questions I raised in my film is how does this affect public access?
Okay.
And I talked to people like Dan Coughlin, the executive director.
Great guy. Yeah, he used to be the head of executive director of Pacifica.
Right.
An alternate radio system that's been going since the 30s. Really good people,
And I talked
for the people again. It's for the
people,
yeah.
And, a lot of my interviews gave me this response that, the internet should not be in conflict with public access.
Not at all.
In fact, I think it's related. I think the best example of the two is like a springboard. YouTube is like a springboard for public access. Public access
I think it's the other way around, if I may.
Okay.
Because public access has been around since about 1970.
Right.
So if you had an image of a John Wayne movie, although I didn't particularly like his politics against the Indians and everything, but you had a movie, public access was there long before there was anything even thought of as a computer. There was public access. And then you had the Pacifica network, radio. There was radio, so we had radio. There was a time when there was no television.
Oh, yes.
I can remember waiting with the friends of ours who got the television set. There was no programming at all. There was a test pattern. We used to watch the test pattern. And then finally there came Kugelfran and Ollie or something. There was no television, or no, that kind of thing. There was
no
movies
programs
at the
airing
movie
at the
theater.
time.
Yeah. But I mean, public access in terms of something for the people was there first. And then the cable, I mean the computer and all that's going on with the internet and all that is like the cavalry coming over the hill. But the pioneers of that for the people was public access. You're right on the money in terms of multimedia because they had simple editing and the cable industry, for its credit. I want to give them credit. People don't seem to understand. It's gotten to be, they've been supporting public access for about 40 years. With payments out of their otherwise net of tax earnings that they could have put into some other business, but they've been supporting that along with government and educational uses of cable television in a competitive mode. They get public relations value for supporting C-SPAN. They ought to get public relations value for supporting public access facilities like this in Queens. But they were ahead of the curve of the computer. It wasn't the computers leading to public access. The public access were the pioneers that were out there, and they're linked. And that's like newcomers coming to the battle of doing something for the people. From public access should be supported by everybody within the internet that's democratically inclined, as pioneers, is what I'm saying.
Exactly, and I think the thing is, what I mean is a springboard, though, is in terms of audience outreach. For public access, it can reach a local community.
No, if I may, let me just tell you, we're streaming now. This program that we're doing with you will be streamed in Flash as a cablecast. It can be seen on a computer everywhere in the world, full screen as television. Huge jump in distribution. It's available everywhere in the world. You can let your friends in Australia know. If they link to New York City time, they can watch it on their computer from the screen like television. That's a huge jump in distribution for access.
That's what the internet does.
Yeah,
the internet really,
it's huge.
Really brought out, as you said, it's the cavalry. That's exactly the point, because now the whole world can see it.
Yeah.
You know, and this is local community programming. Now they can get a taste of, Queens from watching Queens Public Television. They can say, wow, these are some of the people who live here.
Yeah.
They get a flavor for the community.
Right.
And they're like halfway across the world.
And they may have what's going on here might have implications for what's going on in Australia.
Exactly.
And you can link up, people will have a means of linking up in the interests of the people rather than being submitted only to what the big shots with all the money are telling them they have to think through all their institutions, if you can understand what I'm saying. Do you understand what I'm saying? The people can get together and have some influence through an educated use of this computing capability rather than just being a passive receiver of the programming that's coming from the few people who own everything.
And this is the point of public access.
I think so, yeah.
This is about bringing community members together to actively participate.
The people.
The people themselves, right.
Yeah,
to participate
you've heard of them.
in television.
They're the people, you know, like us.
Yeah, regular people. This isn't like,
let our
people
people
from,
go, yes.
This isn't from like a professional from CNN coming in now to tell your story. This is like a community member saying, hey, you got the camera? Yeah, I got the microphone. Okay, he's got the camera. He's got another camera, whatever. Let's do this. Let's tell the story.
And she has a really good idea, and that idea can get out to people.
Exactly.
It's not going to be buried under a bushel basket as it was in the past. Somebody from the people will be able to come up with an idea, and then, hey, that's good. Okay, maybe it's not, but it is good. And then if there is, then there can be getting something other than just what is already approved by all our institutions, which, just as they say, reestablishes the outdated institutional assumptions. You understand what I mean? Yeah. Of a system that has to be subsumed in a larger, liberated order that is the promise of the time. And public access is one important facility of facilitating that consciousness raising or education, no?
I think public access, you talk about learning and consciousness raising. I think in reality, public access, what it does is that, in the mainstream media, the agenda is already set.
Yeah.
Basically, like
serve the interests of the
producers already come out with an agenda. They already know how they want to tell a story. They never go out and shoot a story blindly. Never.
All bought and paid for by the people who have the money.
Exactly. And they could, let's say something happens in Queens, right? Let's say a big fire breaks out or something. They can say, well, now let's say it happened, we don't know how it happened. Let's say the people
Mrs. O'Leary's cow in Chicago.
Let's say, the thing is, they can always say, well, they can spin it their way. They can put out the facts they find. But let's say somebody really knew the real story.
Yeah, right.
And they didn't know this guy for beans. They didn't interview him and whatnot. But this guy's been living here for so long, he knew what caused it, or he knows what's been going on, the devastating effects that it's had on Queens.
Or how it actually happened, and who's to blame.
Yeah, and he can give more of an insight than this reporter can. This reporter
is closer to the reality.
Exactly.
Rather than the fabricated story.
Exactly.
That is the narrative that the people who want to keep power will keep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more than just a who, what, when, why.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
It's now the full developed story. He can tell that story now in public access.
Yeah.
He can now, instead of just, and it's not just for the community, it's for the whole world.
It can be.
Come out,
it can be. It might be for the community. Something might be just the community. Like we can have a program here where it doesn't cost anything. Do you realize how great it is to be able to make something where there's no money involved?
Exactly.
You spelled that out in your first sentence out of your mouth. I thought that's wonderful.
Exactly.
Because that's the only value that's being, it's all outer directed values that are being manipulated, the people are being manipulated by first making the system so terrible that they have to do that in order to have the elemental food to eat and things like that. It's the slavery kind of condition and everything. Yep. But, that's something that is now able to be altered. It's able to be altered now. I mean, the situation can be altered.
And the thing is that, this equipment here, that's filming us right now, this is thousands and thousands of dollars. Normally, a regular guy couldn't even afford a studio.
No, he couldn't do it. If you did it, it would have been like I said. Okay, so a lot of people wouldn't mean it. If you're in a big time studio, it'd be $4,000 or $5,000 to make it, right? Okay, with the equipment, or it would be minimal $400 or $500 to make an hour program. So that means that's what you call a nut. So you can't think about doing it unless you get the funding. You can't get the funding unless you agree with the peer review thing, which is all funded by the rich people, and you're sucked in. And then also, you're a sucker if you're not making. You shouldn't do anything in the world except for some gain, because human nature is selfish, and the strong rule. And the weak will be left behind, and all that. And the world is changing. Exactly. I mean, the world is changing in terms of we may be transcending material scarcity at a level of capability. We may be transcending a world of injustice that we've inherited. Do you understand? Like a big qualitative change going on in the evolution of consciousness. We may be coming to a new relationship to the universe.
I think the thing is...
A liberated thing where everybody can realize their own potential within an ecological context and everything. We have a capability to do that now. And we don't have institutions that can deal with the situation of a liberated, free expression people, because they just never have been, and it can't be, and they will say ipso facto absurd to even consider it possible. Because that's the way they've been considering those issues throughout all of human history. We're coming to a time of qualitative transformation or liberation or something.
Right.
It's never projected. It's never thought. It's never brought up. Nobody could say, "Do you think we've transcended scarcity?" We got enough. There is enough. 100 years from now, they're still not going to be arguing about who gets a piece of bread. Or the things they argue about vociferously now, a quarter point over prime, some sort of advantage or something. Can you understand what I'm trying to say in my frustration?
Right, and I think that what happens here, the system we're brought into, the elite control everything. You know, I always say that the elite, and people talk about, well, there are too many people in the world. I don't believe that. I think
don't either. That's Malthusian.
The system is by nature abusive, and it will take whatever resources it can for the very few who have the most money.
Oh, I wish I had the charts. I could show you just how concentrated the ownership of the capital assets are. It's all within about 93% of the population. Everything is owned by 1%, or the tiny fraction at the top. And it's getting more concentrated. It's more concentrated now than it was in 1789 France. The disequilibrium of wealth between the super wealthy. It's reaching absurd. They're overreaching. Now this empire is throwing bombs into every country all over the world in some sort of a spasm. It's coming to an end.
The thing is, the sad part is that the reason that's growing is because this system, this oppressive system, which shouldn't even be allowed to go around the world, is spreading globally.
Like a cancer.
Exactly. And the problem...
Well, thank you. I appreciate that quick answer. Yes.
You know, the problem is that maybe I just have a darker view of the industry, of the mainstream media. In a sense, the media works the same way. It operates in that modus operandi. They basically come out, and it's for only a few. Right. And it's for the very powerful. They sell it out. And keep in mind, I mean, most of the media, I remember learning this one time, and someone had asked me, how do they make most of their money? How do the shows make? And they say ratings and whatnot. Well, it's not just ratings.
Advertising.
Advertising.
Yeah, right.
The ratings are done for the advertising.
Of course, that's where the talent is.
Exactly.
That's where the real talent is, making the ads.
And remember, advertisers
the programming is something to stick in between the ads, that's all.
What's amazing is before, I took a television history course, and I remember seeing this. I think it was the George Burns and the Gracie Allen show. Yeah. You saw how powerful advertisers were back then. Yeah. Even one advertiser, Carnation Milk. I remember throughout the whole skit.
Procter & Gamble used to be huge.
Oh my God, throughout the whole skit. Yeah. George Burns, stop his show. As soon as he came across a can of Carnation Milk on the table, oh, is that a can of Carnation Milk? You know, Carnation Milk is beautiful.
Yeah, right, you know, right.
And even though you probably hated it, you probably thought, I can find something better in Brazil or something, you know. No, they were the ones who owned that show. Yeah, right. They were the ones who told them what to say. Exactly. They wrote the script. They said, here, do it our way.
It's still that way.
And it's still that way.
It's still that way. And the thing is, I don't know if you ever read Vance Packard. Vance Packard was a man who, I did a program, wonderful man, who wrote a book called The Hidden Persuaders, and the ad industries, and how closely they can read the coming on the history where they had such control of the media, how they can read human emotions, human foibles through thinking and all that, and how they can predict what a certain storyline in an ad, how many more cornflakes you're going to sell nationally by taking this particular thing than Wheaties.
Exactly.
That's the big thing they're going to fight about, which is the Wheaties. And how closely they can manipulate the human consciousness, right? And so we're getting to be where we're becoming media-wise, so where we can see through some of that.
The media savvy.
Media savage and making our own. And one of the pioneers of that is, well, Pacifica Radio. That was a great pioneer. And then a lot of the other films that George Stoney made back in the 30s, beautiful films that were about the people and the trials and tribulations. Or we had films like, you know, Grapes of Wrath, The Jodes, and all that. There's some of that going on and everything. And all the political people who were trying to get something, Henry George and everything. There's a whole history of it. But we're maybe coming to a fruition that is going to lead to the vision of a liberated order rather than just reifying these outdated institutions, economic, political, and so forth, that is being what we see on the news all the time. And public access might be one of the major institutional structures where that can be done, and those creative possibilities will be filled by people like yourself, who are young and coming along and have some sort of a vision and outreach to the world in a positive way. And I can congratulate you on that state of mind. Yeah, and sincerely.
You know, I think this is the great thing about taking documentary as a master's, because when Hofstra offered it, I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
But I think there was something liberating too about documentary, the same way there's something liberating about public access.
Yeah.
I saw different films by independent filmmakers. One of them was Barbara Koppel.
I know.
She did a film about a mining town in the 70s. I'm trying to remember what it's called now.
Yeah. You're not talking about Mattawan. That was another film about farmers. I mean, miners. Yeah. But
right.
She won an Emmy or something for the, I think, Barbara Koppel.
Yes.
Yeah, and she won for a thing about the Contras, I think, too, and the Panama Deception. She won Emmys or Academy or something like that.
But I'll never forget this film that she shot about the miners. I mean, she presented a point of view that's rarely ever talked about, and the way she did it was amazing. You know, you not only got to see the miners, but you got to see how it impacted their families, how it impacted their health.
Yeah.
You got to see the full-blown reality. And she was actually attacked in that film. That's what really sparked the whole thing. Was you know, that was what really shocked the class.
You don't remember the name of the film?
I'm trying to
okay, it'll come. You're going to send me an email when you got it. When you get home. You can look it up. Yeah, you'll find it.
And anybody can look it up too. It'll be, they'll have it listed. But
documentary filmmaking's great.
Right, and just to see the fact that, you know, when she had gotten that scene when she got attacked, I think she was somebody had hit her and hit the cameraman or something. That was the reality.
It was reality. It was reality.
This wasn't scripted.
It wasn't scripted. It was real. Yeah. Okay.
And I saw the same thing with another filmmaker. Trying to remember his name. He did Marshall Curry.
Okay.
Did a film called Street Fight. He's new. He's a recent filmmaker.
Good.
He
Young guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But
good.
he had won Tribeca 2 years ago for Racing Dreams.
Okay.
But he had done a film before called Street Fight, where he filmed Mayor Cory Booker, or then candidate Cory Booker running for mayor. And he filmed his whole campaign and the intricacies
in Newark,
New Jersey.
Right.
And he filmed the intricacies of what was going on. You know, who was this other the incumbent he was up against? What were the implications of Cory Booker and the perceptions of the community? And in one scene, he was actually
real
his
quick,
camera.
we're running out of time.
Yeah,
real quick.
His camera was actually grabbed, and you could just see him struggling with it.
Thank you very much. I want you to send me links to all this stuff.
Yes.
We've got to stay in touch, my brother.
Oh, yes.
Your pleasure had the perceptions of Jason Figueira, a filmmaker, and putting this film together about public access, and thanks a lot for all the support. We have to stay in touch. I'll try and keep you in touch with the old guys. You try and keep me in touch with the young guys coming along, okay?
Perfect.
Between us, maybe we can make a better world. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. That's it, Jason. Get out there and hurry up. Get out of here and go make some good film, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Until tomorrow.